Just some quick observations that you made as you have followed the conversation. Amakanji Thomas says, how can the Agriculture CS parade himself to receive a private consignment in Mombasa? The unga shortage was well planned, and that's to one of the issues that we want to be able to address, whether it's there's a cartel industry here. For those saying, Zab says, for those saying it doesn't matter because maize is here anyway, then how many more things should we assume? Joshua Owira says, definitely a scandal. Every way I look at it, it stinks. It stinks. It stinks scandal, that you say. Amos Kitui says the government is to blame for the shortage of maize. Well, there's a quick response to this whole situation, and indeed a response to the opposition from the Deputy President, William Ruto. That was while he was in Bungoma. I have to play this for you as we continue with the commentary here, and especially definitely to the issue of cartels and alternatives that we have. Let's listen.
Hakuna kitu kipya ambayo tuko nayo sasa ambayo hatujawahi kuwa nayo. Wale ambao wanatuambia saa hii wanatusomea mambo marefu walikuwa uongozini wakati huo, and they did what we are doing now. Wameanza kusema mbona chakula hii imefika haraka haraka. Hii chakula ilikuwa mbona imeagizwa siku chache imefika. Sasa unashangaa kwani walikuwa wanataka chakula ichelewe, Wakenya ndio waumie, ndio wapate ya kusema katika mikutano yao ya siasa.
That's a quick response then. You can expect enough of that in the days to come, being a high season for politics. And just to address one of the issues that was brought up here by one of the writers, and he says, it stinks to high heaven and it looks as if it was planned. Gerald, I mean, in following this story through, and someone else says we didn't quite address the issue of how long it took to get here from Mexico. But as you hear now the Transport Principal Secretary saying it came from Durban, are we able to even investigate? I mean, I'm sure the editor is watching. Is this something that we can follow through, and would it add value to the story?
Yeah, it's something that can be traced basing on, by interrogating the available data, especially on transit of these consignment. They say it came from Mexico to Mombasa. The PS has just said that it came from Durban. So there's a lot of confusion, and government would have had time to explain to Kenyans the true position. Because now with this contradiction, it makes it difficult for anyone to trust the government anymore on this issue. And now that the CS is saying that it's coming from, I mean the PS, sorry, is saying that it came from Durban, it leaves one with a lot of questions. And the duration of consignment, actually, as I spoke to millers earlier, they said that from Mexico to Mombasa, it will take at least between 30 to 45 days. The Gazette notice to effect importation of maize was done on around Easter. From Easter to today, it's about 30 or so days. So, as journalists, those are some of the issues that we need to interrogate.
And that's if we follow through on this particular story. But because the talk out there is that, at least on the street, your everyday people are talking about the cartels and those people who are hoarding. Is it useful for us as journalists to at least attempt to address this issue by investigating, getting to the bottom of it, so that the doubt is gone? Bonotula.
I think the role of journalists as the people's watchdog, they cannot escape that. And Kenya has very good investigative journalists compared to many parts, and they do excellent job. Equally, I think, to be fair to our journalists, I've seen very, very innovative ways of informing and educating people in agriculture issues. When you see things like seeds of gold, they are doing something. They are almost doing extension service for the government. So, and actually the Ministry of Agriculture does no longer have extension officers. So we should not really be harsh on the media. And politicians worldwide will try to cover up their steps. But where Kenya is going, and with the democracy as an open society, I'm sure Kenyans themselves will avail information.
Right.
And it is not difficult to trace some of these things. The whole thing boils down to the government need to be, no government in the world where we are going should lack the capacity to stock food or even avail food. I would not complain if the government took its own money and went shopping for maize.
Right.
It doesn't have to go through private sector. They can also be told, go and bring and we compete. But where people are unable and people are dying, and you know, the government has a right to even these procurement procedures which were brought by, they have advantages by donors, but they bring things at very high prices. And you go to the government, they say their hands are tied up because the highest bidder was almost double the price. But across the street, you can buy it at 1/3 that price. We could go to Ethiopia and bring maize at very cheap price. We could go to Uganda and probably even Ugandans would be bringing maize if they know Kenyans like maize. They can't eat matoke.
Right.
So the government should be bold enough also to say, yes, we are doing this and transparently. The big powers do it. There is no reason why we should bring those cartels, and these cartels also have to operate within certain guidelines. I'm sure the cereal millers would like to look that they are ethical people. They are not out to exploit or so. A bit of I'm sure in a month or two, some of these brilliant investigative journalists will thread the story together.
Right. Do you think, Nzetse, for you, it would help in pushing the story forward to at least get some clarification on whether there's some hoarders?
It is always good that these things are clarified.
Right.
And people know the truth. It helps.
Yes. And this is because there's a comment that Nzetse made earlier. I mean, why would we dwell on a particular issue? What purpose does it serve? You know, who does it answer to, at least to go through with this narrative of cartels or, you know, hoarders? You don't see the value of this?
No, I see the value, but what I don't want is for us to get obsessed and stay in the speculative space, which is what seems to be what people want to do, so that we can talk about how, you know, how the country is not going well. I agree with the gentleman that it would be useful for concise, objective, effective investigative journalism to take on this issue and get to the bottom of it, not just so that we know what's happening now, but so that we can prevent it from happening in the future. And I think that's also warranted so that next time government handles this better. The way they've handled this sort of maize shortage, well, the way they've handled from the drought all the way to today has been wanting. In terms of communicating to the public, in terms of what's going on, in terms of communicating the remedial action, if any, that they're taking, and in terms of what they're doing to correct the situation. Right. So I think, if nothing, an investigative process would be useful to make sure that government is a bit more responsive and a bit more proactive in how they communicate to the public about it. But what I don't want is for us to sit here, talk about this for 3 days, and then when the report comes out, nobody reads it. Right. That's what I don't want, is that if we're going to demand these sorts of things, then we as Kenyans need to have the stamina to follow through on that story and make sure that when that report happens, that we actually learn from it and then apply the necessary pressure. Because I think sometimes we just like listening to ourselves talk as Kenyans. Sometimes that's the impression I get.
And Daktari, we mentioned during the break how there's a cyclic nature to this. And in your recommendation as a researcher, you're keen on this particular issue, especially from the agricultural world. What would be your recommendation to the media world in terms of planning? Because you'll see this coming, and you say even with global warming, it's probably going to happen even more, and with the growing population as well. So what would be your recommendation in terms of media's perspective?
Well, I think it's just like any other media. When there's a very hot issue, like now the focus today is where did the maize come from? How long did it take? So we have shifted the focus from the food crisis that we had, the planning that we did not do earlier, because the researchers has shown as early as September, after the rain season failed. And right. We have the forecast from KenyaMet that also the rain in December is going to fail. So the focus shift completely from addressing the poor planning that we have, and it's not actually new to this government or the other government. It has always been like that. So the question will be, like, who is benefiting from that? Because as sane people, we can't be repeating the same mistake all the time. Right. We have always been having a food crisis. We know that one of the reasons that because we're depending on maize. We know that we have opened a lot of irrigation schemes in marginal areas. We know, as the research showed, that those is just a short term. If you grow maize, it takes 3 3 seasons, and then salinity problem will come up, maize won't grow anymore. So why don't we, like as media, focus more of having alternative crops?
Right.
Sorghum, which is being shown to do very well under those marginal areas. For example, and we look at the people who are hard hit by this crisis, are the people who are, we term as pastoralists.
Mm-hmm.
So the pastoralists depending only on maize. Why are we not talking about livestock and their input, which is like huge contribution, almost occupying 85% of this land? So these are the issues that we need to address and to focus on as moving forward. So if the media follow blindly what has been just said from the politician, we will have the same problems. I mean, in maybe 2-3 years, we'll also have the same sitting talking about the food crisis and talking about probably the price of maize going to 300 or 400.
Mm. And Judy, as Tegemeo, you definitely keep doing research on these issues and feeding the information to media. But is media the only access you have in terms of putting the word out there to the government and the country? Or do you go directly to the government and warn them?
Sure. We don't only use the media as our channel to do outreach. We have various ways that we conduct outreach with. For instance, even when we have done research, the core mandate of the Institute is to conduct research in an objective manner and then disseminate it to the stakeholders. So we always invite the stakeholders in forums. So it is determined by the Institute what is the appropriate forum for the kind of information we have to give out. So most of the times, even when we invite the journalists, they are part of other stakeholders, for instance, in a breakfast forum, which we did last year. So we have the government, we have the Cereal Growers Association, the farmers themselves, the county executives, the media, and very many other people who are key players, even the academia and fellow research institutes in there. So we communicate with them through such kind of forums. And then besides that, we also have organized forums where, for instance, we go directly to the ministry and we have sittings and discuss on key issues. For instance, sometimes we go there and harmonize on figures because, you know, even the ministry does its own research and also the institute also does research. So when we are doing research, we refer back to the ministry. So we want to find out what did they find out in terms of the food security, the cost of production, expected output and things like that. So we engage like that directly. So we don't do it on our own. And also besides that, we have other fora like the website. We have a website. We have the social media. I mean, several areas where we are able to do that kind of outreach, even international conferences.
Right.
Yes.
But as mentioned by Nzetze earlier, does this end up in recommendations and reports that filed somewhere and don't really reach the Kenyans? The many fora that you have.
Okay, I would say no. They get to reach the Kenyans because we do outreach well and involve farmers most of the time. And if there's need to go back to the farmers, for instance, there's a research that had been done and it involved soil testing. You see, at that particular time, you have to go back and tell the farmers this is what we found and this is what means and issues like that. So we do even the county outreach and get back to the people from whom we did get the information from.
All right.
Yes.
Let's get the last comments from everyone here, and I'll start with Gerald. Tomorrow we're expecting a big announcement by the ministry, at least the CS. Actually, it was meant to be today, but they pushed it to tomorrow. I don't know if it's coinciding with the ultimatum he was given by MPs that if he doesn't resign, they will hit the streets, mass action, what have you. But if they announce, you know, the reduction of price, is that where the story ends?
No. As a media, we need to look into long-term solution to this perennial problem of maize shortage in the country. We hardly produce enough. Every year, we've got a shortage, a deficit of around about 20 million bags. That's a lot of maize. I understand that the CS will be making a statement tomorrow. Through my sources, I've learned that they have released some new stocks of maize to millers, and it will be going at a cost of shillings 2,300 per bag. That's quite a significant reduction from the previous cost of 3,000 that millers have been buying maize at from NCPB. But going forward, government should be serious with the agriculture. We keep on talking of agriculture as our as the backbone of the economy. But how much funds do we allocate to the sector?
Right.
It's less than 3% of the national budget. Rwanda has committed 10%. Have you ever heard of hunger in Rwanda? It's because of the serious transformation that they've done in their agriculture system.
And some might say it's up to us to push them and really put the pressure on them. And let's say tomorrow's you'll see breaking news, the new prices. But beyond that, as a development economist, what would you want to see in the reports, informing the reports from tomorrow onwards, given the expectation of the big announcement?
What I'd want to hear, there are several things I'd want to hear from the government. One is, how did we get here in the first place? What are the issues going on within government in terms of coordination between county government and national government that allowed this situation to reach where it has reached today? We knew this was coming, so I'd like to understand why wasn't this addressed and how will that be corrected in the future? I think secondly, the other issue is we need to talk about the cost of production in this country and have a very thorough analytical effort, and perhaps it's been done, but I haven't seen it or read it, a thorough analytical effort around what it costs to produce our staple crops and how we can get the cost of production down. I also want the ministry to talk about post-harvest losses. As what has been said before, over a third of the food that is produced doesn't even hit the market. And then even the food that does hit the market, about 40% of that is thrown away. So what are we doing to make that chain, the value chain of agricultural produce from farm to fork, more effective, more efficient, so that it can be spread, so that Kenyans can get the food that they want to get? And then finally, I want to talk about the subsidy issue that the gentleman here has raised, is how we're going to create these long-term structural issues that can be financed, because people talk about subsidies, but they don't talk about how those subsidies are going to be financed in a long-term manner. It could be through allocations, increasing allocations, it could be through creative mechanisms, but what are the long-term mechanisms that we're going to have to make sure that the food that Kenyans get at the end is affordable in a sustainable manner? Because once this batch of maize finishes, are we back to the same problem? In 3-4 months, are we back to the same problem again? Right. That's sort of the conversation I'd want, not just the short-term actions, but the long-term vision as well. Right.
Bonotula, as an editor here at Science Africa, in your experience, will this stop hitting the headlines and we'll jump on to the next big story from what you've experienced over time? And if so, how can we keep alive? What themes can we keep alive in this particular issue?
I think the media is already being pulled in very many different directions. But they need to remember that even politics is about development. And development in Africa is about basic human needs.
Yes.
So you will find food, housing, water, clothes, all these things are there. And already there's a lot of effort going on by journalists. But we need to push it, as we say, to county level. Counties should now also begin to start improving food security in the counties. They just collect money from the markets. The markets are not even hygienic. There are no toilets for people. And these are all linked to food and well-being. The constitution, by the way, we have a very good constitution in Kenya. Everybody is entitled to adequate, nutritious food. So even if you leave politics alone, who can supply that? Adequate, nutritious food.
Right.
You are entitled in a clean environment. So there are very many angles which you can take. But we can assume that we are evolving, and the role of media is going to increase more and more.
Right.
To look at some of these issues. And researchers, let's not forget, we are very good researchers in this country, local and international. But the work they do is often overlooked, and the easiest continent to plunge in disorganization is Africa. Even before, you can find, as you mentioned GMOs, you find us mentioning GMOs, and even before we have the skills. We have universities offering young people degrees in biotechnology. And they are told this is just a form of breeding. We pretend, and we have had GMOs being eaten here. When you get food aid from countries that don't segregate like US between GM and non-GM, they're just mixed. And then the big chiefs are saying, we don't want GMOs. They go to South Africa, they eat these things. I have seen cases where even politicians and others who are potentially anti-GM have even gone out to see GM farmers in America, what they are doing. They come here, they don't even plant a seed. They just, our attitude towards research and science has to change.
Right.
And the government needs to do that, and our policymakers need to, or else we'll not be going anywhere. Because finally it boils down to science and our own homegrown. We can have millers from all over the world flooding this place. Unless they are millers with homegrown roots, we are just going to go through that circle of importing. So we still have a long way, but the journalists are trying. We have to appreciate what we have.
Yes.
The meteorological department is doing a very good job. I used to cover meteorological when I was young, still here, and there are lots of challenges. Till I had one time to remove my name from the weather column when they said it will rain in Mombasa and it will be dry, and it rained. And somebody called yelling at me why I told lies. But nowadays they're actually
They've come a long way.
They warned us that this situation will be like this. And they don't just do that nowadays. They even put up the scenarios. Floods or drought, we need to have food. They have improved. They inform, yes. And they are at county level. So the journalists can even go to the meteorological offices in county level in terms of food security. And those people nowadays do a lot. Right. They're not just figures.
Dr. Tari, is this an opportunity as well to moving forward? We, of course, know that the attempts at irrigation have failed, but can we explore another retry, or at least rule it out as an alternative moving forward for agriculture?
Well, I think we, as a nation, we face with two options. We either adapt to new way of doing things, embracing technologies, alternative way of sustaining ourselves, so at least we can move from being a country that's depending on a single crop to a country that diversified its productivity and productions of variety of crops. We will actually have to perish, because at the end of the day, everybody will try to take an advantage if you are in a big problem. So now is the questions that we have. We have been doing a lot of research. I mean, if you look at the researchers in Kenya, we have like one of the excellent kind of institutions, yes, including ILRI, which does biotechnology, livestock, University of Nairobi, and other universities. But the real question is how much from the research is being taken to policy.
Right.
And we need to find where the gap is. Otherwise, if we don't do that, we will just do the business as usual. So it's very important to look at also the agricultural sector as a holistic sector. We don't only, for example, invest in making sure that we have enough maize to store. Let's look at the store condition as well. I mean, we have very huge amount of maize that has just gone to waste. Why? Because it has overstayed its time. It's not safe for human consumption anymore. So those are the real issues. What we have been doing so far is more of touching on the surface. Yeah. We talk about maize from Mexico, not from South Africa. We blindly follow the debate about GMO. Yes. If the GMO is something that's good for the country.
What of irrigation?
Irrigation as well. The problem with irrigation is that, sadly, in the northeastern part of this country, we have turned many of the grazing reserve that the pastoralists use for dry season and drought into irrigation schemes, or we revived old irrigation schemes, yes, without taking into account that things have really changed. We don't have the same ecological conditions that are suited for this particular productions. But on the positive side, they are very good experience, especially from, let's say, Tana River, Isiolo, and these other areas, where pastoralists have impressed growing grasses and storing it for some time. So if you look at, if you do a quick kind of look over the data, you'll find that the drought effect is not as used to be for those, some of those counties. And also some of the counties have impressed a bottom-up approach in terms of planning. We have very good cases in Isiolo, Wajir, yes, where the government is trying to use local level structures to plan for their needs. Because as I said earlier, the drought or the cost of living is not a short-term thing. Yes. We won't solve the problem of high price of maize by importing maize.
And perhaps these are the stories that we need to tell, the examples, yes, that are working.
Yes, right. So that's what you need to focus.
Judy Kimani, finally, I mean, you give us the facts, you give us the data. Do we break it down in bite-sized pieces for our audiences, from your experience? And, you know, leading forward, we're going to have the big story tomorrow, and it'll be about the reduction of prices, but then what?
Yes, I think it's very important to inform the masses out there in terms of what is the correct position. So the CS will come and give his view, and the media, even being coming from a journalistic background, it is our duty to report there what was said by whoever said it, but also look at other people in the industry who are relevant to that particular storyline and come up with bites or with reportage articles or paragraphs that we can beef up to the story, so that we are also able to quell you know, misconceptions that come up outside of come up out of what the CS will say or other people say regarding the issue that's going on. And also to echo what my colleagues have said is that the media is doing a very good job. And in fact, I really appreciate that right now, almost every TV station has a program that is agriculture related, and they cover diverse topics on that program. And also in the print media, there's the same coverage and also web-based. And what I would say is that I believe there's room for improvement. And as journalists, I said earlier, we have access to anything in this world. You just need to have a contact, call, prod, if you don't get it, prod again, and you will get whatever you're looking for at the end of the day. So that we are able to set the pace well, inform the masses, fight off the misconstruing information that is going ahead and talking about issues that would, you know, stifle the actual issues that we really need to be focusing on. So that, say, come next year, we shall right now, as the media, be setting pace. Yes, we are having this problem that emanates from the last year. But what is going on this year? Are we trying even to educate the Kenyans in terms of what can we do ahead of next year? So that if it is in terms of, yes, if it is in terms of low rainfall, what can we do? What crops can we plant at this particular time? And, you know, even as much as the county government may not have extension services, the media is a very crucial voice, and we can report and shape change in this nation.
All the work is cut out for us. Thank you very much, Judy, for your view. Thank you, Dr. Elhadi and Bonotula and Anzetse Were. And Gerald, you say your source gives us information about a reduction of price for the millers. Just a recap on that as we wind up.
Yeah, I understand that the government has reduced the price of maize selling to millers. The latest consignment is going at shillings 2,300 per 90 kg bag. Yes, this is opposed to 3,000 that it has been going at previously in the previous consignment.
So that will come as welcome news, at least for the viewer and for the rest of the Kenyans. But there's a lot more that we can follow through, as has been told to us by the panel. Thank you for your attention. Thank you to the panel for your views and your participation on this. And as well, yes, we did welcome the Ministry of Agriculture. We did welcome the millers to this conversation, but they opted out, and we can guess why. It's a sensitive time. They didn't want to preempt anything. Anyway, we keep following this story. Watch us, of course, as we do that, and keep us on our toes. Thank you for your candid views on this particular episode. My name is Mark Masai. Have a good